I am happy to be your moderator here today for this fabulous panel that we have. I'll start to my right. I have Stephen and middle initial T. Is that important?
No.
Okay. it was on the the brochure, so I thought maybe it's important. But he graduated from here in it doesn't say, 84? Okay.
Officially 83, but I had to wait for one of my major professors to come here on grant money.
Okay.
He wouldn't come out here just for me. So.
He's a geologist, and he as part of your first time getting to talk, you can elaborate on that. To the right of Steve, we have, and he graduated in Eckerd in 1997 and College of Marine Science in 2005 with his master's degree, also a geologist under the illustrious Hine. And he works for APTIM. I don't know what that stands for. Okay, I'm glad to hear that, but I was prepared to look in here very quickly to find out what APTIM is, but congratulations on that. And to his right, we have Monica Wilson. She's also an Eckerd graduate from 2003. She got her master's. And let's see, I work for ERT, just Earth Resources Technology. I'm so new, I don't even know the name of the company. And I also have my own consulting firm that I do on the side. And sometimes that's nice, and sometimes it's hard to do two jobs at once. All right. So the original concept for having this gathering was to introduce some of you to what we used to call alternative science careers or non-academic science careers, and non-traditional academic scientists you are exposed to on a fairly regular basis through the seminar series. So we wanted to bring the non-academic scientists in here that are an alumni. Gives an opportunity as well for them to reconnect with the college and the university, and also let you guys know that there are other opportunities out there in case you don't want to or don't end up becoming a college professor somewhere. So I'll go ahead and just ask each of you to tell us a little bit, 5 minutes or less, about your experiences here and what you do for a living.
Well, I left here, and my life happened to me rather than there being a plan. I ended up here totally by accident. But it all worked out well, and I was aiming for the oil industry in 1983, but while I was waiting for my major professor to get here, the oil industry went into a massive slump and started laying everyone off. So that job wasn't there. So I ended up needing to make money, and went to work for the state at the Southwest Florida Water Management District, which actually caused me to go into the field of hydrogeology and environmental work. And I was there for a couple of years, went to work for a company called Garrity & Miller, a national groundwater firm at that time, one of the first groundwater firms to go into the environmental field. They had a sterling reputation, but about 3 years into my career there, where I intended to spend my entire professional career, it was a great place, they decided to pump the company up to sell it. So the culture of the company changed, and me and 3 other employees left to form a firm. So again, everything's just happening to me, and I'm responding to it. And that firm lasted for 25 years. We were very successful. We worked all over the country on major environmental sites. We developed water supplies, where some of your water comes from that locally. And in 2015, There were 3 of us left, and we were kind of worn out, so the company was acquired by a national firm called Enercon Services. And now I work when I feel like it on what I want to, and get paid for it. So there is a rainbow at the end, and I have to say there are a lot of rainbows along the way. So.
All right, thanks. I originally grew up in Maryland, came down here in St. Petersburg to go to college at Eckerd College, wanted to study marine science and not so much the fishes and mammals, but into something else. That's where I learned about marine geology and ended up being able to stay here. Worked at the USGS for a little while, came here with Al Hine and worked with Al Hine and Stan Locker doing seafloor mapping and working here in Tampa Bay and doing kind of the sub-seafloor analysis of the structure of Tampa Bay. From that, I was able to land a job with a company I had worked with intermittently throughout my undergraduate and graduate career called Coastal Planning and Engineering. It was a local private Florida firm that specialized in coastal restoration, beach restoration, seafloor mapping, environmental remediation, and permitting. So I've actually been worked for that firm since I've left. It's just many iterations later. At Coastal Planning, worked up, became a partner at the company. Company got sold to a publicly traded company called the Shaw Group. And much like Steve, there's an acquisition theme here. Then the Shaw Group got sold to CB&I, and then CB&I divested our operating group to a new private entity called APTIM. So we are new as of July, and we're a large 15,000 person company that does lots of different things. But our coastal group does, again, the coastal restoration side of things, and then the office that I have here in St. Petersburg focuses on geophysical and seafloor mapping, mainly with identifying sand resources for use in beach restoration projects or clearing seafloor from hazards, geohazards, or cultural resources for other infrastructure projects like wind energy, offshore wind farm work, and oil and gas infrastructure work. And I've known Steve for a number of years because one of the benefits of the local industry is when I was opening the local CPE office, Steve's company was opening a local coastal office, and we were actually able to get together and share office space for a number of years. So that worked out very well, and is with Bruce Barber, another alumni, and it allowed us to kind of grow together, which has actually worked out quite good.
Thank you. I also am an Eckerd grad, originally from Texas. I did come over to study the fishes and the dolphins, and then realized what classes I would have to take to do that, and I decided I didn't want to do that. So I changed to a geology track. So I have a double major in computer science and marine geology from Eckerd College, and that is what brought me here to Mark Luther, who is a numerical modeler. I had no physical oceanography background. However, with having a marine science and a computer science major, his numerical model lab seemed to fit the two together, do two things that I enjoyed doing. So I mistakenly became a physical oceanographer somehow. And so I studied here it took me 10 years to finish my master's and PhD. Right after I graduated with my PhD, I did not have a job lined up, so I had a part-time job here at the college in the academic affairs office. And 6 months later, Florida Sea Grant was looking for an oil spill research extension specialist. It was a regional team, so there was 5 Sea Grant programs that were going to form this team, 4 Sea Grant programs, 5 states that were going to form this regional oil spill extension team, and they wanted a multidisciplinary team, and luckily physical oceanographer was one of those, and so I fit the bill. So I got that job in July of 2014 and have been doing it since then. Like Mary Beth said, my office is in the KRC 3rd floor. I was able to stay here and keep my office here locally, and I do travel across the Gulf region to do seminars, and we write publications that synthesize and translate oil spill science. So we were basically hired 4 years after the Deepwater Horizon to share science that's coming out from the Gulf of Mexico Research Initiative and share those with the folks who need the science to make decisions on how to either restore do restoration projects or just the information they need to protect their beaches and their habitats if an oil spill were to come, or if they just have general questions about oil spill. We basically try to answer those questions with them, or connect them to scientists who can answer those questions for them. So.
You can go ahead and keep that.
Oh.
I'll just go. Thinking back on your time here at College of Marine Science, was there anything you would do differently in your academic preparation, knowing what you know today? Or are there, what mistakes can students today avoid, or what opportunities should they avail themselves of while they're here in grad school to prepare for a job?
I know I sat in Maya's class. Actually, I just did a alumni panel for her a few weeks ago, and I took that very first class she offered of that version of that class, and so it was fairly new. But I actually wish I could have done that sooner, and they wish they had offered it sooner. Grant writing, proposal writing. I unfortunately did not have that experience during graduate school. I applied for scholarships and funding in that form, but I never had to actually search for money to support my graduate career. So I think if I were to go back, I would have loved to have more help as far as writing proposals. I have now written a proposal. Yes, I have now, and it was a big experience. I had to do a whole budget justification. I had no idea what I was doing, so it would have been helpful just to have something of that sort, I think, for myself.
I'll say something that I benefited from, and something that, like Monica, that I could have used more of. It's actually the same thing or similar, but the thing that benefited me the most from preparing me for a job in the consulting world was the actual field work and technical work that I did here at USF. And this applies to some tracks and not others as much, but for the seafloor mapping industry, there is a large industry out there. And what differentiated me and what differentiates people that we hire in our office is actual practical field experience. And by that, it's not just going out and collecting data. It's the setting up the systems, the troubleshooting of the systems, the what do I do when this doesn't work and it's 11 p.m. and there's no one here for me to talk to. I mean, that proved very helpful to me, and it's something that I would highly recommend to anybody. Practical experience in what you want to do will really kind of highlight you moving forward. And again, like Monica, the biggest thing I felt unprepared for, and most of this is my fault, thankfully Al and Stan aren't here because they would probably get on me again, but is writing. And I procrastinated on my thesis as long as I could. It turned out to be stressful, but probably the most individually impactful thing I've ever done from a personal growth standpoint, and it has aided me moving forward. But so much of my job in particular is grant writing or proposal writing, client proposals, developing cost budgets, trying to figure out what the work effort would go into and how much money I need to cover that. Those are things I did not spend a lot of time of doing in graduate school. And then technical report writing. And a lot of every one of our projects has a report at the end. And so having good data graphics and things of that is important, but having a concise and thorough scientific technical report at the end is key. And that's something that, I wish I had more experience doing while I was here. Half that's my own fault, though.
Yeah, I remember lots of nights at happy hour when we were leaning on Beau to get his thesis done. And his progress reports were always very optimistic, and he was making great progress, and things didn't seem to be moving. But then suddenly he took off, and he's really done well. I actually tried to hire him at a couple of happy hours after a few beers. I actually tried to get him to take over my ownership of my company, because I really wanted someone else to do it. I'd be working for you now if that had happened.
And here we are today.
Yeah, he was smart enough not to take me up on that. I think they've stolen a lot of what I would say. I would go on to say that take as much advantage of the multidisciplinary training you get here that is outside your core interest to learn everything you can. That's in the classes, just asking questions. One of the reasons I put in my bio that I try to make it to happy hour on time is I learned a lot over in what we used to call Bannon's Lizard Lounge over there on Friday afternoon. Because at 3:30 in the afternoon, I was in charge of happy hour for a long time, and at 3:30 in the afternoon, Bob Gerolds would come to my office and stick his head in the door and ask me if we were starting on time. And if I had gotten absorbed in something I was doing, it was time for me to jump in my car, go get the beer, do what we needed to do, and be ready, because he was going to be there at 4:01 looking for a beer. And one of the things that happened at that TGIF, and really in everything we did socially, and it was a very close family back then, as people who were here at that time can tell, you were small and close, is I learned a tremendous amount about science from my fellow students and from my professors when we weren't being educated. We were just talking. And to this day, I know about sponges because I knew a guy that was studying sponges. And you'd be surprised at how often that little bit of information you picked up over a beer before you got too drunk to talk about science it turns out to be useful later on in your life. So a multidisciplinary education like the one you get here is a tremendous advantage over a lot of the people you will compete with if you go into the real world the way we have. They don't have that. They only know their field.
Thank you very much. So sort of along those same lines, some of you touched on this already, but are there any skills or abilities that would differentiate a College of Marine Science graduate, make them more attractive for hiring in your fields or similar fields? Maybe you have a broader knowledge of the job market besides just what you're actively working in today. And if so, could you name sort of top 3 technical skills that employers are seeking in new hires today?
Pass it down.
Where do I get to go first?
Wow.
Shoot.
Well, you don't want to just hear from me.
Let me see. So technical skills. I don't know if this is technical, but one that I do know that was beneficial was my communication skills. Whenever I talk to a student or they ask questions about necessarily just job hiring, I told them one of the best things that I did as a graduate student was not studying at all. It was sitting in on. Right. I studied, but one of the best things that was actually just for me to get me prepared to go in the workforce was I was actually on a hiring committee and was able to sit in on interviews. And I got to look at resumes, and the ones that I thought were good were not good. And so I was like, okay, so I won't do that on my resume. It gave me ideas on what the hiring committee was looking for. And then just sitting in on interviews again, they would say, well, did you see how she answered that question or he answered that question? And actually that was very, very beneficial for me. It was probably one of the most beneficial things because I was going through the same process at the same time. And so that was sticking in my mind, and I went back and redid my resume and redid my cover letters and made sure that I was practicing the skills that I was learning that these people should have when they're coming to an interview. So that was very helpful. And I know they allow students to get on hiring committees, and I would suggest to do it just merely for the experience of watching someone else go sweating and having to answer questions, and just gives you kind of a heads up of what to prepare or how to prepare yourselves when you're actually going in for that interview. So.
I'm not sure about your negotiating skills too, in terms of not working in Northwest Florida.
Yeah, you can negotiate. So luckily I was, my position was originally supposed to be in Milton, Florida, near the Panhandle, near about 20 minutes from Pensacola. Not much in there. I saw a Waffle House when I was there. But my position was originally only for 2 years. It was only funded for 2 years. And so when I came, actually, Dr. Nahr and Dean Dixon, and I told them this is what's happening. And I don't know how to, do I just say no, thank you. I don't want to be in Milton for 2 years. And of course I have a family too, so moving them up there for 2 years is a little, would have been very stressful for us. And so they walked me through it and said, well, how about we negotiate? And I was like, I can do that? And they're like, well, of course you can. I was like, okay. And so I was able to talk with the dean and talk about pros and cons of me staying here and that I would still be able to do my job here because the dean would so graciously give me a office and a phone. And so when I did that, I got on the phone and I said, okay, this is what I would want. If you let me know what you think, and if I can stay here, then yeah, we'll talk about it. And of course they did okay, we'll go back to the hiring committee and we'll let you know. And so I had like 3 days of waiting, but they came back and said, yeah, that's okay, you can stay, we'll let you stay. And so that was actually one of the best things that I could have done, is just stay here with the family. And now I'm still working with folks that I've been working with for, I don't even know how long now, 14 years. So I'm still around people that I know and recognize faces. I might not work for the University of South Florida, but I'm still definitely part of the family, so that's really cool.
So, top three kind of technical things. Again, they might not all be technical, but for seafloor mapping, it's a highly technical field to begin with. So you normally, having technical experience in the systems that you're going to operate, and as diverse of systems as you can operate, is beneficial in private industry. One thing, this might sound weird, but one thing I'm finding is important is having a basic understanding of everyday tools that you would be expected to use from a computer standpoint. I mean, I'm talking about spreadsheets, I'm talking about word processing even. You'd be surprised the number of people who don't know the basics of things that we have to use every day in our life to support the technical side of our jobs that we do. And they're strong, they can be very powerful tools. And we rely on them heavily. And I learned more probably about Excel and Word when I got into the management side of my company than I did doing, technical calculations and things in Word, to be honest. We have an estimating spreadsheet of workbook of 9 different spreadsheets that does things I didn't even know you could do in Excel. But that helps. Again, going back to writing, even if you're not going into a situation where you're producing peer review documents, having them out of grad school demonstrates your ability to process and write. So I would encourage you to do that and then use those in your applications and in your interviews. And the single biggest thing I'm learning now, and we just hired someone over in our office, so we just literally went through this process. We had a lot of applicants, surprisingly, for this job. And one thing that we kept coming back to from my team is your ability to interact with others. Not just communication, which that is super important, but also your ability to interact with others, especially in a difficult situation. Going back to the troubleshooting thing, we'll find ourselves having worked a 16-hour day offshore in rough seas and something doesn't work and everyone's getting a little fried at the end of the day. How are you able to individually troubleshoot and problem solve, but also do that within a team? Teamwork in our offshore setting is critical. From a kind of micro, we have a broken situation, up into a macro situation of collaborating with other scientists at other organizations. So being able to work in a team, I think, is something, again, it's not very technical, but to me it almost kind of is more important that we're seeing. You'd be surprised at the number of people that can't work in teams or don't want to. It's tough. It's very, very difficult. But I've learned over the years that there are clues, and ultimately that's what it comes down to. So you try and discuss a situation. That's how I do it in the interviews. Is I'll give an example of we're shut down in the middle of our 16-hour days. This is not broken. I mean, this is broken. How do we interact with this? Because one of the things I've learned too as a manager, everybody's different. Every personality is different, and dealing with those individuals can be quite difficult, or not difficult, but you have to figure out how to deal with individuals. So the best way I try and do that is to kind of talk through the situations or ask if they've been in situations or try and get descriptions of situations like that. So I don't necessarily say, well, this is a teamwork question, but I build up to it and ask specific questions on how they've interacted or encountered other things to kind of shed some light or give me some clues on that situation. And it works well. I mean, I find at times where you can tell if someone is someone is a team player or not, based off of how someone else handled some of the questions. That becomes one of the factors that we look at as a group.
And it's doubly important when you're at sea.
Yeah.
Because if you want to see something blow up really well, Have a prominent seat.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Could also be the animal that you pick when they ask you if you were any type of animal would you be. There are those who are, you know, aggressive versus those who are collaborative, you know, I mean.
Chooses a viper.
So how, what animal would you be?
Let's talk at 4:30.
I just want to ask you one follow-on question, Beau. Since you brought up sort of the team behavioral question at an interview, it's no less important sometimes to be an individual contributor.
Yeah.
So even if you're maybe if you had to say I'm 75% individual contributor or 25% team player, that wouldn't necessarily knock you out of the running if your ability to be an individual contributor was exceptional, like personal initiative or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, that's 100% true, but it comes down, I was using the teamwork case because I was looking for a field employee, but it comes down to the job description, essentially. There are a number of jobs where you can be an individual contributor, kind of a self-starter, self-motivator, do your own kind of thing. But I'm finding especially for entry-level jobs, offshore, teamwork's a big component. But it is a very good point. There are things positions where, being an individual contributor is just fine.
So in consulting, business development is very important, which means going out and getting new business for your company.
Can I
Absolutely,
do
go
just a
ahead and
little bit on
answer.
that?
I was just going to say that that's
Because-
an example.
Because
for
what Beau is actually saying about what we like to see in new employees is really what we talk about in a very frustrated way at happy hour. Beau and I and other people who manage people. If you're a person that never bothered to learn how to drive a manual transmission because you just thought, I'll never have to do that, you were wrong. Okay? You were wrong. If you work for a company like Beau's or mine, the day will come where you need to drive a manual transmission. If you don't know how to start a generator, if you can't calibrate a pH meter, if you really don't know how to do an Excel spreadsheet, you may snow us at the interview and get the job, and then you're going to fall flat in the first year of your career in what I refer to as sort of the applied science world. And the reason for that is the work we do is very interesting. Sometimes the budgets we have to do it are just ginormous. I mean, we have millions of dollars to spend. And you can do some really interesting, creative, innovative science with that money. But there is an expectation that there are objectives to achieve, there are schedules, and the people we work for have very real things they need to get done that if they don't get done, they stop something else really important from happening. So you kind of have to be a person that can plug in and do everything that's needed. And it's a lot of the things you're going to be asked to do are not things you learned here, like what he was talking about, being a team player, being someone that can problem solve. And I would take the being the individual contributor one step further, because I've had a few employees like this, and I refer to them as superstars. They are the people that have all those skills beyond their scientific skills that cause them to be the person the team comes to when a problem needs to be solved. And that is the person, and Beau's one of these people. I'd like to think at one time I was. You're the superstars, you're the shooting stars, you're the ones that rise fast. And it's because you're recognized as senior material before you become senior. You just float based on those skills. So absorb. If you have a chance to learn something that seems mundane, don't say no. Just learn it. And someday it will serve you well.
Do you require that job applicants have to take the state geology test?
Well, if they're a geologist, it's very helpful.
Oh, you guys are geologists.
Yeah. Some positions you don't need it. It depends on your career track and the kind of firm that you're in. In my field, if you don't eventually take the professional geology exam, or if you have a degree in engineering and you don't take the PE exam, it can pretty severely limit your advancement. It just closes doors. And the more registrations you have around the country, the better, because you know, one of the people I work with is registered in about 30 states, which means he gets pulled into a lot of projects because we don't have a PE in South Dakota, but he's a PE in South Dakota, so he works on that project. Yeah.
I would echo that. Because I am a licensed geologist in multiple states, and it's not a fun process. But it shows you what you learn, what you know and don't know about geology, because you got to know everything. You got to be able to be responsive in multiple states, even though you're licensed in the state. We don't require it, but we do encourage it, and it does indeed make you a little more valuable. Exactly, and I encourage it because, to me, it caused, you know, it was another goal that caused me to learn more and achieve, and so I encourage it. So we do use licensed geologists in our day-to-day to sign and seal documents to make sure they meet certain standards in different states. We don't use it often in the coastal field, but we do it for certain things.
And in my field, it's an absolute requirement. You can't submit the plan or the report without the seal.
Right.
So, or the design.
It's been suggested that we offer like a certificate in project management, that there's students and postdocs that are interested in that. Is that something that's valuable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's an actual certification. It's like a state licensure, but there is an actual certification called a PMP, Project Manager Professional. And so I'm seeing it more and more, especially in the scientific industries, you know, the applied sciences, as Steve likes to call it, where not only are you a scientific expert and you know the technical components of what you're doing, but you can actually manage projects as well, which is key, because that's where the budget and the proposals and, you know, how you're executing the job all kind of comes in. So I think that would be a good thing to add.
And the young lady in the back?
What's a licensed geologist?
Well, you're looking at two. So,
Oh,
there you go.
Not much, apparently.
Not much. No, yeah, it's a registered professional geologist, licensed professional geologist. Most states have programs. They also have them for professional engineers. Geologists fought for decades to get a professional geology registration, and we finally got one after a passage of the various environmental laws, the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and then in the 1980s, the Superfund law and all these others that actually required us to go out and really evaluate and clean up sites. And it turned out that engineers were not trained to do geology, and a lot of mistakes occurred. So
The ones that force the geology thing.
yeah. So, and they worked very hard to keep us from having a registration, because registration requirements generate work for people who have them, and it generates competition with engineers. So it finally did get passed to, and it's been a success. The projects go a lot better, and actually engineers have decided they need to know some science, which they didn't need to know before, or didn't think they knew before, and they need to understand what we do. So a registered professional geologist typically means that you have a degree, an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree in geology with a certain number of hours that qualifies you to, after 5 years, at least part of that time being under the supervision of a professional geologist, to take a test, and if you pass the test, then you get your registration. And in most states, you don't have to renew it. Once you get it, you get it. Now, something we don't teach a lot of here at USF Marine Science is structural. It's on the test. Okay?
Did you ever have to retake the test?
I didn't.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
I know a lot of
Yeah.
geologists that did.
I studied. And you will have to study again in 5 years after graduation. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I know the whole history of this thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's,
I was on the committee that
yeah.
made the first test, though.
yeah.
It's
So-
brutal.
But I never got it.
So what it, yeah, a lot of people didn't. A lot of people didn't. Well, I made the mistake of not getting it before you had to take the test, because if I'd done it a year earlier, I would have been grandfathered. Shows you how old I am.
There's also professional wetland scientists and environmental professionals. Those are similar, where
Yeah.
you sort of have have a basic credential, so you have to fill out an application saying I have this educational component, then I have this experience component. You turn it in, they say, okay, you're cleared to take the test. You pay an inordinate amount of money, you take the test, and hopefully you pass. And then there's continuing credit hours that you sort of have to keep up your certification.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to add, more of on a basic level, is a licensed engineer. Certain things states require a licensed engineer to do, so it's a legal thing. It's like driving. You can't drive without a driver's license. There's certain types of geology you can't practice unless you have a license. Same with the engineers. You can't design a bridge unless you're a licensed structural engineer. So ultimately, it comes down to the state license to make sure that you have the qualifications needed. And each state does it individually.
Yeah, that does not mean you can't work as a consultant without the PG, but if the work is being done that requires a PG seal, you will be working under the direction of a professional geologist.
Okay, one more question, and then we'll take some from the audience. I'm sorry, one more planted question.
One we prepared for.
It's pretty important. So if you have had opportunities to give back to the College of Marine Science, either monetarily or in other ways, have you done that? Could you elaborate on that? And what benefits have you received? Because we're trying to inspire them as alumni to want to give back in the future as well. And it doesn't have to be College of Marine Science. It could be your undergraduate alma mater, a professional society, something like that as well.
I'll start. I've been an absolutely horrible alumni in that regard. Yeah, you're right. I did make contributions for the first few years after graduation to both my undergraduate and USF Marine Science, and then just kind of got greedy and I had other charities that I was and things that I was involved in that were consuming a lot of my disposable income. So I kind of left the universities behind. But one of the things I just want to say, one of the things that struck me as Monica was speaking, is you'll find after you leave here, there's basically only one degree of separation from you and every other person that's ever gone to this university, plus all of the other scientists that we know. So, and that has turned out to be tremendously beneficial over the course of my career. I'm still in touch and lifelong friends with a lot of the people I went to school with here. And as a result of that, I've met a lot of other people. And I've never met Monica, but I know 100 people she knows. So if I was asking a question about someone like Monica, needing advice from someone like Monica, somebody would direct me to her, and then I would know Monica. So, yeah.
From the giving back perspective, see, Bruce Barber and I both kind of tried to get the alumni up and running prior to Mary Beth. Mary Beth's done a good job of doing that after us. We kind of threw in the towel after a while.
All I do is happy hour.
Yeah. I think that's pretty important.
As we've heard today, it's very important.
Yeah. I've given financially to the college. I've given financially to undergrad. This is the second alumni panel that I've done for the college. It's been a number of years since the first one. And I try and stay involved as best I can. I also, advertise and make sure that if we're looking to hire, that both of my alma maters know about it. I have a number of Eckerd College employees, and I've had USF employees in the past, none at the moment, College of Marine Science employees, people that got their degrees here. So I do look for that as well, because I know that the educations coming out of both of those organizations support exactly what we're trying to do at APTIM. So those would probably be the biggest ways. What do I get out of it? I get potential employees out of it. I get to come here and sit in front of you guys and talk, which I enjoy talking apparently. And one thing that the undergrad does a little bit better than USF is there's a number of alumni programs, and there's a number of college programs at Eckerd where they reach back and invite alumni to. My wife and I, she's also an Eckerd grad, we're members of the President's Collegium donors at Eckerd, and so we get invited to monthly events at Eckerd College. They have book readings and things like that we get invited to monthly that we don't partake of very often, but that is nice to be, you know, part of. So that's one of the things that we enjoy of it.
Did you join organizations like GSA and AAPG and SAPM?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Society of Exploration
And what's it
Geophysics. GSA, AGU, Society of Exploration Geophysics are the national ones I'm a member of. I would say it's not terribly useful to me, unfortunately. Most of them are either really science or academic based. You know, AGU's is more of an academic institution. SEG has more of an oil and gas slant. The geophysics I tend to do are more environmental. We do have local or smaller organizations that fit our industry better. Florida Shore and Beach Preservation Association, American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. We're members of both of those organizations. I get a lot of benefit out of those, but that's because my clientele base is there. The exact science we're into is there. And so I don't mean to knock the others because these work very well. It's kind of specific to your career, I would think.
On the professional organizations, I belonged to them for a long time, a variety of them, and the company typically paid my dues, and I had stacks of journals, and I would occasionally read them. But the biggest disappointment for me in the field I went into, which is environmental, is we had mainly private sector clients, and we did some really amazing work that we should have been able to publish, and they wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
So we weren't able, we actually ended up not getting credit for our innovations, and somebody else would copy them, use them somewhere else where the client would allow it to be published, and then they would publish it. So that's one of the irritations of being in the applied science field. The other side of that is that your clients pay you very well not to publish. So if you're, if you're making a lot of money to do this work and it's very interesting and rewarding, you just don't get credit for it, and that's one of the trade-offs.
How much,
Yeah.
how much pressure do you get from the clients to give them the answer that you know they want?
Boy, I have a good answer to that question. Do you want to go first?
That doesn't matter. It's up to you.
If you are a consultant or a provider of scientific and engineering services that won't do that, you don't get hired by those guys. You have a reputation of just not being we'll tell you what you want to hear kind of hired gun consultant. And that's actually the way my company's reputation developed, is we wouldn't do it. So they didn't hire us. And if they did hire us, and usually it was attorneys, and they found out we weren't the right kind of consultant, we were out the door pretty quick. And we were fine with that. So that's, if you're in it for the money, that is a tremendous way to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Eventually you get caught, and your reputation, does this. But if you're in it for the long haul and to be proud of what you did, you don't do that. And you don't have to.
Just real quick, throw in there. I haven't had the same experience only because most of my clients are local state governments. And so I find if you can explain the situation non-aggressively and based in scientific fact, they'll accept it. The commercial clients or industrial clients I have worked for can be a little more that way, but there's also normally a benefit for what I'm doing in terms of site clearance and site characterization. They don't want to encounter a geohazard. So if I can show you, I'm not lying, you don't want to put a wind turbine here for this reason, then I've just actually saved them, as opposed to, it might have cost them more money to move it, but it works. Whereas the work Steve does is completely opposite. Steve's doing a lot of forced environmental remediation and things where you're not necessarily a willful participant to begin with.
Yeah, the companies don't want to spend, well, they do, but they don't want to spend $1 billion cleaning up the Willamette River in Portland, for example, but they don't have a choice. So, yes.
I was going to ask, did your state clients ever ask you about climate change or to take it out of the report?
No, and it's something we deal with, but we deal with climate change significantly because in our beach restoration, shore protection projects, we have to account for that. Our engineers want to account for that. And so this is a big, at the FSBPA and ASBPA conferences, this is a big theme, and it's something we present. The DEP's in the room. The state and local governments, I'm finding that the state and local, local, county, and municipal governments are embracing it more so in Florida because they're the ones that are on the front lines of dealing with it. And most of the work we're doing with the state governments aren't at the executive level, and I think it's really more at the executive level where that's happening.
All right, so let's circle back. The question was
Sorry.
giving
It's
to,
okay.
giving to USF College of Marine Science or your undergraduate. And Monica.
So I don't necessarily give in a monetary form. I do more of my own time. Participating in this panel, I participated in Maya's panel a couple weeks ago. I was on the planning committee for the 50th year anniversary and helped in a panel there. And since I am still in KRC, if there's an event or anything that usually happens in the college, I'm helping plan or decorate or do some sort of fun crafting thing. As for undergrad, we left after we graduated. My husband became a coach at Eckerd for 9 years, so we were in and out very frequently. I was always there. So I would also give as much as I could with time-wise there in that portion. I helped paint a locker room one time. So that's usually how I give back, is just through my time, not necessarily monetary, but I'm hoping to get to that point where I can start helping in that way, so.
So I'll just give a shout out for joining the Alumni Association. And there are lots of benefits to doing that. I think it's free your first year.
It is.
And it's very affordable. After that, is it 35 or 50 bucks? I can't really remember. Either way, you'll be fine. Ask your parents if you have to.
You throw in a gym membership?
Um,
No,
You
that's extra.
can participate in some of the, gym activities. And you also get journal access to Science Direct. Some of you won't even realize how much you'll miss that
Yeah, that's very
when
key.
you're gone. That is a huge benefit, and then you get invited. Sometimes you get those emails that you were talking about, like you get from Eckerd. I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but are there any other questions in the audience?
Which journals do you get access to?
Anything that, if you have, pretty much everything that you have access to right now through your, through College of Marine Science, through your ID, you get as an alum. There's a few ones that they pull back that they don't offer, either because the library thinks that alumni don't use it, or they've done some sort of study and figured it out. I don't know. But
Now, yeah, let me tell you, that's key, because I work regionally as a team, and we all work at a different university system, and let's just say they're always asking me, hey, do you have this paper? My university system does not have connections to this paper, so we're always asking each other. We have people at LSU and Auburn, Texas A&M, and we always there's an email, anybody have access to this journal? And usually it's me who always has access, so that's actually pretty cool.
One short comment. I think that Steve mentioned the thing about taking advantage of your colleagues, the students that are in different disciplines. I think that's, at least for me, it was critically important. But in addition to that, what was especially fascinating, I spent almost a year of my graduate life at sea, going to sea and watching other people in other disciplines having to attack problems where the nearest hardware store ain't around the corner. How do you solve a problem in which you're crippled unless you solve it? That is incredible. So even though you might not want to go to sea, I would say it's a great learning experience.
I would echo that. I didn't have the advantage to go to sea as a graduate student because I decided to have 3 kids while in graduate school. But undergrad, I was able to, actually I was on a cruise with Beau, that's how I met him, and went on a week cruise off 25 miles off Clearwater doing some multi-beaming, and it was pretty interesting. I had the new midnight to 4 a.m. shift, which wasn't the greatest, but we did have, the undergrads got that shift, right? So we did learn a lot, actually. The ROV got stuck in the propeller, and we had to figure out how to do it in the middle of the night, and it was a really cool experience, and I wish I could have done it more. But if you have the option, I know there's always emails Jay sends out looking for divers on this cruise. I would take advantage of that. It would definitely, even if it's not in your discipline, it's still, I learned how to read a side scan sonar there, and I'd never seen one in my life, and learned how to do that, and learned how to log data, and Learn how to eat ice cream nonstop.
Yeah, that's a benefit.
But
But,
reports you get to visit, like Georgetown guy.
Yeah.
but that's also where you learn the other things Steve was talking about, like starting a generator, things like that.
Yeah.
You
How to
know.
lift one. You know, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. I think there's one other thing I want to say, and I've been thinking about saying this all along, and it's something that I ran into as a person hiring people right out of college for a very long time. And I'm not quite sure, it applies differently to everyone, but when you go into the world that Beau and I live in, maturity, showing up, understanding that you're part of an effort to get something done, little things like dressing appropriately, acting professionally. You know, if you're told not to wear flip-flops to the office, don't wear flip-flops to the office. It just creates issues. Staying out of the drama, don't get involved in the drama. Don't worry about what the person next to you is making. If you're doing a good job, eventually you'll make more than that person, unless that person's doing a better job than you. But it won't happen today, it might happen a year from now. Bring your professional self. And at this point, you may not even know who that is. But do the best you can, and on your first day, whether it's going to your interview or your first day at work, try to bring that best professional self you have. It's much more important than you think it is. You could be the greatest scientist in the world, but if nobody likes working with you, you're not going to succeed. It's just that simple. So it's success in everything, whether you stay in academics or you go into applied science or you go off and be an Uber driver. Doing it well is as important as anything else you do. And doing it well as a person, you know, as a professional, as an adult. That does as much for your success as all of the stuff that's packed into your head when you leave here. Yeah.
Do you guys have mentorship opportunities? Or did you have a mentor through your company?
I did not, no, I was just thrown in. I mean, I can call folks and ask them questions. I don't specifically have one assigned to me, but there's definitely easy teamwork that you can just, it's so open and free, you can just feel free to call anybody and ask them questions.
Do you mentor others?
I do not. I'm one of the newer folks in the group, so no, I do not mentor others. But I've always told students here that if they're willing and want to ask more questions, to feel free to stop by my office anytime. As long as my door's open, they're more than welcome to stop in and ask questions.
That's
So,
You do it.
We don't have a formal mentoring process, but I mean, by default, it happens. You have newer people, and you're training them. You know, they come to you with questions and things. So I mean, it kind of happens. And I didn't have, you know, my boss and a couple of my, you know, contemporary colleagues. We all kind of bonded together and learned together, and kind of, you know, take that team approach, and you kind of learn together. So. I would say there's a formal mentoring. We do sometimes do internship programs where we could bring an intern in, but not a formal mentoring program, but it does happen.
Formal mentoring programs that I've seen actually don't work so well, because the person who's assigned as your mentor doesn't really have time to be your mentor.
Right.
It's somebody that really knows what they're doing, and because they really know what they're doing, they're very busy doing it. So the mentoring you get is kind of cosmetic. The best mentoring you're going to get is from the people you're working with. So, for example, the way we did it was we would bring somebody in, and for the first 6 months to a year, you were never in the field working by yourself. You're in the field working with someone that had already been in the field for a year or two. They knew what they were doing. You're in the office working on something. You're surrounded by mentors. And the message I kept driving home is, this isn't high school. You don't have to figure it out for yourself. If you don't know how to do it, ask somebody. Okay? And so a lot of mentoring comes that way. And it works really well. It works really well. The other thing about all of that field work that you end up doing early in your career, it starts to seem repetitive, and you're away from home a lot, and you're working 16-hour days, and you have these problems that crop up at 8 o'clock at night. You're getting off the boat, or you're coming in from the field, and something's broken, and you got to figure it out before you go to bed. Right? So you don't get a lot of sleep. After it's over and you're managing other people, you realize the enormous amount of things that you learned.
Yeah.
It's a continuing learning process that is as intense as the one you're experiencing right now. It's just different. And you don't realize how much you're learning until you start using it. So that's really a good way to be mentored.
Yep.
I have a question, invitation. I'll start off the invitation. Ernst Peebles and I are buying a keg of beer to celebrate Josh Kilbourne's successful defense. And since you spoke about happy hours, well, we'll have one after this session if you're interested in communicating further. And the question I have is for Beau. I had a master's student who's defending next week who went to Indian Rocks Beach to look at sedimentary changes of where we deployed some mines and now they got buried and scoured. It's an ONR project with Al Hine and Stan Locker. We went there and all the sediments was gone. Somebody judged it for beach renourishment. I'm just wondering if you're responsible.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's called Bar Area L. And it now extends from Clearwater Pass down to Madeira Beach.
Well, I have to introduce my student to you so you can find out more about it.
And there's absolutely no hard button there, right?
No, exactly. I mean, that's key. The state does follow
I
that.
have a similar question. How many times are you going to try to fix that erosion problem on the south side of Blind Pass?
Yeah, this is, we're putting the final solution in right now.
Well, I see you
That's
moved-
also our
I
project.
see you moved the jetty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the jetty's staying the same, but we're taking
Oh,
out the
okay.
five geotextile groins and
Taking
putting in
those out.
4 rock groins.
Okay.
And we're
Okay.
trying to preserve the surf break too. We're adjusting the 4th one.
So I know it's beer 30, but before we depart, and before I do my thank yous, I want to let you know Howard's going to share on my behalf. I put together a little flyer. Every time I do one of these seminars, I say, oh, I'm going to do that, and then I never do it. But I actually did it this time. I have a couple of pages of resources that may be useful for you or not. If you don't want them, you can just ignore them. And I just want to go through the top 5 must-dos that if you want to write these down, you can. You should create a long CV now, and you should keep it up. And that if you don't know what a CV is, a curriculum vitae, you can go Google it, and then you can create a short one from your long one. Include the classes that you're teaching if you're a TA, including the course numbers and the numbers of students in your classes, and any grant funding that you get. Create a LinkedIn profile and keep that up. Get 2 or 3 recommendations on there, which is not the same thing as an endorsement. That's a little different. If you don't know about LinkedIn, Google it. And all of us probably have business cards up here, so we'll share those at happy hour if you want. Build connections on LinkedIn over time, and you can keep your profile current by making a professional post monthly, and keep it professional because it's not Facebook.
I have a question about LinkedIn.
Yes.
I've been told that isn't that beneficial in the scientific community to have a LinkedIn, and people haven't seen it actually benefit them in any way.
Right.
Do you feel that it's opposite of that?
I totally do. And
Yeah.
I was
You guys
just about to
often-
say,
You guys often get looked at LinkedIn
Yes.
for employees or contact people on LinkedIn for
everything.
jobs?
You can get business on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
There's news articles, there's
Mhm.
scientific articles. I look at it daily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the third bullet is ResearchGate. Create a profile on ResearchGate and keep it up, and know your score, your ResearchGate score. I actually submitted an application recently, and they wanted to know my ResearchGate score, and I was like, oh crap, I don't even know. So thank God I still have my password to get onto ResearchGate, and found out, and it was a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. So I was pretty happy with that. And that ResearchGate is more known in sort of the academic scientific realm, but even the AAAS recommends LinkedIn now. And if you go to their website, which one of the entries on here is their science page, it tells you to do that too.
Can I add something about the CV real quickly?
Yeah.
When you, first of all, no accomplishment is too small to put on your CV. If you don't want to use it, you can take it off when you submit it. The other one is, and this comes from someone who is 64 years old. I have things on my CV that are from so far ago, I don't remember what they were. So I'm serious, I've worked on hundreds of projects, and I have these really impressive descriptions of a project, and because it was a confidential client, I can't tell you where it was or what I did. All I see is my paragraph, and I should have, in an annotated CV, I should have made some notes, and I didn't do that.
Yeah,
So-
you can put your
Yeah.
sea hours on there, know the names, they mentioned the equipment that you're using at sea and in the lab, know the names of those
Should name the
equipment.
vessel too that you were on.
Yeah.
And
And
the cruise number.
the hours, your hours at sea, whether or not you were a PI on a project, were you the chief scientist on the cruise, you know, the size of the vessel, did they have ROVs and various equipment that they were operating? Number 4, there's just one more after this. Create a list of 5 or 6 references. Make sure the information for them is correct. There's nothing worse than calling a recommendation a reference and the phone number or the email doesn't work. And make sure that they will give you a good recommendation. I've actually called for hiring, and the person ironically told me, don't hire that person because they're not good in this. And I told the applicant, I said, don't put them down as a recommendation again because they didn't. I said, I'm not hiring you not because of that, it was a factor, but they need to know. They needed to know that wasn't a good place.
And like,
Um,
like was
go ahead.
mentioned, nothing's too small. Even volunteer work can completely get you
Yeah.
on a different
Exactly.
level than someone else because it can show your communication skills, your teamwork skills. I have stuff listed that I was a team member of the soccer team, and that apparently was really beneficial in this hiring process that I had no clue it would have been. But because we needed to work as a team, they're like, well, she's on a team. She's been on a team and succeeded on it. And so that was actually very helpful. And they were able to you know, use that experience to show that I can be a team member and work with folks, with many different personalities. I also did that as well, yep, and that was also helpful as well.
Divide those references up by their whether they're professional teaching or personal, and have them handy even in your phone or in the cloud, because you never know when you're going to have to send those references or CV. Were you going to say something?
Just wanted to say that in interviews, my style of interviewing was never one which some of you will run into, which is a very standards-driven, qualification-driven kind of, you know, make you nervous, put you under the light kind of
Aggressive.
aggressive, yeah. And I've been in those, and it does make you very nervous, and it's really difficult to do well in those interviews. I always liked interviews where it was just more of a conversation. I've looked at your resume, I already know what your degree is in, what jobs you've had, and I want to get to know you a little bit. I want to know not just how good a scientist you are, but what kind of a person you are, and whether you'll fit into my organization. And so, don't be afraid to put a little bit of that on your resume. Shouldn't be full of like walks on the beach and dog parks. I mean, you don't have to get quite to that level of fluffiness, but don't be shy about putting some of that stuff on there. You know, if you like sports, put on there that you like sports, and then be prepared during the interview to let a little bit of who you are come through. If you're very stiff and nervous, first of all, not letting yourself come through will make you stiff and nervous. Okay, you're trying to be someone you're not. So be yourself, and a sense of humor is fine as long as it's, you know, not the whole thing. And take your lead from the person who's interviewing you, and let them see who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one, last one.
But don't lie on that CV.
Do not lie.
No.
Do not
Do
lie
not
on
do
the
that.
CV, and do not lie during the interview. In fact, as a professional, don't ever lie. It's just not worth it. And if you make a mistake, don't hide it. Tell everyone immediately. And then, I mean, that is the rule. The worst thing you can do when you make a mistake.
Steve learned that one early.
I know that
All
one.
right,
Just look at the typo in my bio.
so I want to
I made a
thank,
typo in my bio about it.
I want to thank the panel. Did you have one last question? Go ahead.
Question about the resume and CV. I know that usually you have to tailor a resume to a job description. Would you recommend putting all the information about your background, like all the degrees you got, certification, even though it's not absolutely not relevant to what you're performing?
Wait, you're applying for dog catcher, I mean.
So a resume and a CV are a little different.
Yeah.
So your resume should really be 1 to 2 pages. That can be customized for whatever job you are applying for. In that case, I wouldn't, this is just me, but unless you're new and you need to, in order to get a 1 to 2 page resume, you need to put everything like I was dog catcher in there. Go ahead. Don't put anything from high school though, but college up is fine. But your CV should be everything. Like, you have to, you can pull things out of your CV to fill out a job application. It's fabulous. So you just keep that as a Word document. I often will send, if they ask for a resume and they give me an opportunity to attach another document, I'll throw the CV in there. Because a lot of times that has the weedy details about, I've been at sea, I've operated, 3 paragraphs worth of equipment. The things you cannot put in a resume, and also your audience in a resume is going to be the HR people and maybe the hiring manager, but for your CV, it's going to be the people who care about those details. The HR person is not going to wade through your 15-page CV.
Yeah, actually 1 to 2 pages is to catch their interest. If it depends on what kind of job it is. The other thing, a resume often won't get any interest. Some companies have HR departments, and it goes there and it goes in a file. Small companies like mine, that happened with some of them. If a person just clearly wasn't qualified to work for us, it went in a file. If they were qualified, it often took one other point of contact to get that resume on my desk. So that would be somebody that you knew that worked for me, or worked for Beau, or worked for somebody else that would tell me this person recommended that I look at this resume. So network.
I do want to follow up on that, because I do work for a large company, and it does go through HR first. So, and I do get a number, and they do an initial pass. They won't even pass it on to me unless they think the person's basically qualified. And this is an HR professional, not a marine scientist. So I think, to go back to the original question, you need to try and boil down, if you're having to submit a resume, what do you think the hiring manager is looking for? What is the job description? And then put in the things there that will grab grab the HR person's attention and the hiring manager's attention. So you need to have something in there that shows that you're basically qualified for that job. That's what the HR person's looking for. And then they're going to say, all right, well, this one gets sent to Beau. This one we never talk to again. And that's how they do it, and it's awful. But I have no control over that. They put it over there, and then I don't even know how many they didn't send to me. And then, so that's the first tier. Second tier then is, I get it, and for instance, the last job I was having, it was for someone to do data acquisition and data processing offshore with sub-bottom and side scan sonar and multi-beam. And I put that in the job description. So that's what I want to see, is that you have that experience. So if you have the experience that the job's looking for, hit me over the head with it up at the beginning. And then, anything else that you think supports that, I would put in the resume. If it doesn't support it, I wouldn't really include it in a resume.
But Beau, getting back to that first scenario
Yeah.
that you mentioned, the HR person didn't pass you her resume.
Yeah.
But she knew that you were the hiring manager.
Yep.
She said, hey, Beau, I applied for this job.
Yep.
I'm really interested. I'm a College of Marine Science graduate. You may not know me, but, I saw you at that seminar.
Right.
I'd really love to work for you.
Right.
Then you go, oh my God.
Yep.
I didn't get her in my application stack.
Yeah.
HR, I would like to know.
Yeah, and they do, and they'll send it right to me.
That's networking.
And so sometimes I can request every resume that comes through, but that's exactly right. That's a great example of networking, actually, because then I can get them to send it on to me. And did that this exact last job.
I would make one, and this is the long shot way of getting a job, but it sometimes happens. It's kind of like, I don't know how many people here, follow sports drafts, but sometimes a team will just take the best player available, even if they don't think they need that player at that position. And we hired people over the years simply because we didn't know exactly what they were going to do for us, but we knew whatever we needed them to do, they'd be able to do it. And so if you're that kind of a person and you have somebody that will sell you or help sell you, or you can sell yourself, sometimes you don't need to be applying for a position that's open at all. Sometimes you're just the best player available. And the odd thing about applying for a job is you actually have value that the people who need employees absolutely need. We can't do what we do without people that can do it. So you have something to sell. So when and it's your qualifications, your training, your attitude, your willingness to work hard, all of those things. And if you can impress the person that you're interviewing with that you're going to bring all those things to work every day, you may not need to be an exact fit to get the job.
Yeah.
And some of my best hires were people, I didn't know what I was going to do with them, and I hired them. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I've hired a few people in my day,
Yeah.
and I always found that the best thing to do was to take them in the field,
Mhm.
and that's where you see what they can do.
Yep.
And how they react,
Yep.
whether they ask the right questions and so on. So remember that.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
On-
Good to see you.
On that note, I want to take an opportunity to thank the panel.
Thank you.
And also most especially, and Dean Dixon for having us back for the alumni panel, which is always fun for us. I hope it's fun for you guys. And let's go drink beer. So, next Marine Science Happy Hour is next Thursday, featuring Maya and a couple of other.
Oh, for
Yes.
show?
You'll get an email.
Oh, that's a cool thing. That'll be awesome. All right.
Oh, yeah?
I'm gonna sneak out this way.
All right, sounds good.
I don't want to upset Carol's jokes.